Even celestial creatures are overtaken by karma, and the balls quickly knock them down. Help also comes to her from the air. The ships launch an attack on the remaining mutants. Looking up into the air, the commander feels a little lighter at the sight of their warships. One of the main traders orders a retreat. The operation fails due to the fact that they were unable to finish off the girl. But John does not even think about letting go of the enemy. He is rapidly advancing towards him. The enemy commands his minions to execute the third emergency evacuation plan. Lined up in one line, the obedient soldiers suddenly raise their heads upward from the discharge that pierces them, and they all explode at the same time. At this moment, Annabelle's strength leaves her, and having lost consciousness, she begins to fly down. Sam notices this and, gathering all his speed, manages to catch the professor, who was about to come into contact with the ground. Looking at the exhausted girl in his arms, the young man feels calm. Fortunately, he managed to catch her. John, emerging from the smoke, wonders how he could allow his subordinates to blow himself up in order to escape. The soldiers of his army warn the commander that they are beginning to pursue the enemy. But the commander stops them and orders them to build a fortification and take care of the wounded. At the beginning of this operation, John was confident that everything would be successful, but everything went wrong. After a little time on the hospital couch, Chuck finally comes to his senses. He tries to get up, but his whole body hurts like hell. Sam recommends that he not move, but just lie down. Chuck goes back to bed and wants to find out what happened to their enemy. The main character says that with their joint efforts, they were able to send the enemy to flight. These words calm the student. He already thought that his life was over, and Chuck didn't want to die as a virgin. Sam says that his friend escaped with minor injuries, but he was prescribed rest for the next 3 months. The young man is glad that he at least survived. The main character mentions that if it were not for teacher Annabelle, the circumstances would have been much more tragic. The last thing Chuck remembers is how the snipers pinned her down. Sam begins to tell in more detail how things went further, but he is interrupted by Marie running into the first aid station. The girl reports that Professor Annabelle has woken up and calls Sam Levins to her. They enter her room, and Marie reports that she fulfilled the request and brought Sam here. The girl immediately decides to clarify whether he caught her. The young man smiles and replies that it all just happened by itself. She is also interested to know if he may also have removed the blood on her body. This immediately makes the young student blush. Marie, standing nearby, giggles and says that it was she who cleaned up the blood and changed her clothes. Annabelle throws off her blanket and asks to be taken away, as she needs to talk to the commander. Sam quickly runs up to the bed and, taking the professor by the hand, wants to help her get up, but does not meet with a positive reaction. Behind him, Marie laughs again and says that she would rather help the teacher get there. The young man burns with shame and quickly removes his hands from Annabelle. At the same time, the traitor Roast is being electrocuted. Despite the pain, he screams for them to continue and not stop. Annabelle enters the room with Marie and Sam. John inquires about the professor's well-being. The girl reports that she is feeling better, and she thanks them for their care, and besides this, she asks if there are any results. John says that no amount of torture or drugs forced Roast to speak, and his neighbors said that his family disappeared a few days ago. Apparently, he thought of everything. Annabelle wants to know what he will do about it, to which the commander believes that the traitor should be brought to a military court. Mr. Morans reports that the enemies made a technological breakthrough. The transmitters they removed almost immediately turned off, and now they are ordinary prosthetics that they cannot present as evidence in court. Roast lets out a loud laugh, saying that they are accusing an innocent man. The man will not admit to anything and will wait for trial, and he also promises that Sam Levins will answer for everything. Annabelle asks the commander if wartime rules are still in effect, and John replies that after the attack, he gave permission to accept a military situation. The professor thinks that there will be another attack soon, and they would do well to intensify the interrogation of the spy right now. The commander unconditionally agrees with her and orders the immediate use of unconventional means against the spy during interrogation. Hearing this, Roast begins to shout that they have no right to do this, and when he sees Annabelle approaching him, he begins to shout that he will tell everything and answer all questions. The girl already understands that most likely he did not leave any traces, and his accomplices already know that he was captured, so now he is of no value. She uses her abilities on him, and Roast's body slowly begins to twist into a kind of knot. Annabelle admits that most of all in the world she hates traitors. The traitor begins to emit death rattles when suddenly Commander John, with a quick movement, strikes the enemy's throat with a dagger. The commander admits that he does not want her to take on this burden. He himself has already claimed many lives. Mr. Morris orders it to be recorded that the interrogation lasted 5 minutes. Then he notices Sam and says that he showed himself well and everyone here is indebted to him. John notes that first the young man was able to find the pursuer, as well as find out the identity of the spy. The main character, not knowing how to respond to such praise, simply gives out the stock phrase that it is his duty. Walking along the street at night, Marie decides to ask the professor a question why the traitor was not shot on the spot. Annabelle explains that in the future they will understand that there are certain laws, and sometimes bad people understand them better than good people. She also explains that the commander called her for a reason. She and he are in different camps, and if he writes in the report about her presence, then the higher-ups would have more confidence to lie low. Sam and Marie realize with horror that their enemies have foreseen everything, and it was all a trick. Annabelle says that the real world is completely different from the world they used to know. It is full of lies and deceit, in which enemies are everywhere. Only by working hard will they be able to survive in the gene era. And the first lesson that the guys must learn is the ability to protect themselves. The convoy of equipment, accompanied by air, continues on its way. Marie believes that if they were accompanied by air forces, the enemies would definitely not dare to attack. But Sam reminds her that these are the guards of other schools that have just been liberated and flew here. Chuck, lying on the couch and eating a corn dog, argues that yesterday's guy managing the land is a real devil. He almost destroyed the entire convoy. Even the commander could not catch him. Annabelle joins the conversation and says that all the enemy's actions were clearly planned, so they attacked them with the help of the owner of earthly genes. She also notes that Marie Sank has the ability to control plants and radiation, and if it weren't for the plants on the battlefield, she would hardly have been able to contain that mutant, so she and Sam were very lucky. The student decides to ask what their professor's rank is. Annabelle believes that now they can already know that she is a permanently changed C rank. Sam is surprised to hear this news. It turns out that with an S rank, you can be a professor at Care Genetics University. The girl adds that as for the transcendental type, the professor must at least have a complete transformation. However, the requirements for the hidden type are relatively small. For those who have special abilities, an exception can be made. Marie does not lag behind the teacher and wants to find out her abilities, but Annabelle only advises in the future not to reveal her abilities to others. This will guarantee that they will live much longer. She tells us to never forget about this, and everyone answers in unison that they understood her. But there is a small discrepancy. Sam reminds that after enrolling they must report their genetic data. He wants to know if this will be a problem. But Annabelle hastens to reassure them, because their data will have a very high level of confidentiality. A large metropolis finally appeared outside the window. The guys, despite all the difficulties, were able to get to Kyoto. The guys see flying skateboards outside the window that cost about $1 million and begin to dream of the same ones. Meth at this moment mocks his classmates, calling them a bunch of sheep who have never seen anything in the world. Chuck decides to approach Sam and ask if he thinks Marie Sank likes him, because yesterday she literally didn't leave his side. The young man begins to refuse, and at this moment the girl just decides to sit down with the guys, driving Sam into even greater embarrassment. The cars finally reach Keir University, and the loudspeaker immediately announces that students can take their things and leave the vehicle. It is also loudly announced that the entrance test will be held tomorrow. Chuck is sure that in his current state he will definitely not pass, and he will be immediately expelled. Sam offers to find out if he will be allowed to take this test later. How lucky it was that paramedics were already heading towards them, and when they saw Chuck they ordered him to go with them, since in the near future he would be released from any activities. The young man cannot believe his luck and decides just in case to find out if it is free, and the answer pleases him even more, because for this period all his expenses are covered by the university. Despite his diagnoses, he surprisingly quickly jumps onto the bed and is ready to go for treatment. Marie warily asks Sam what is happening to their comrade, but the hero only replies that their comrade was happy that he will be eating for free for a month. Finally, the main character gets to his room during this time. So much has happened, and he is pretty tired. He immediately starts thinking about training, but he can't take that risk right now. Although his parents told him not to worry about money, progress in training would come at a cost. If he gets a grade of C in tomorrow's test, he will be rewarded with 20 F-rank energy capsules. Roughly speaking, if you count in money, it will be more than his father's salary. But even if so, subsequent capsules will cost him just as much. At the moment, he has only two problems: money and supplements. Tomorrow he must try. To achieve C rank, he needs to open at least 20 gene points. He is still missing 2. If he can break through today, then almost 1/3 of the entire year's training costs will be solved. This time, his left hand will also be able to throw soybeans. In the morning, exhausted from yesterday's training, he wakes up on the floor to a knock on his door. Getting up and opening the door, he discovers that Professor Annabelle has visited him. She doesn't stand on ceremony. She immediately walks inside without an invitation and orders Sam to close the door. The girl also interrupts him and asks him not to look in her direction. She puts a piece of paper with words on his desk and asks him to focus and read what is written there. Using his telepathic ability, he reads that the piece of paper contains the number of kilograms of apples and their price per unit. Annabelle says that this is enough and asks him to put on his pants. Sam agrees, although he thinks to himself that she herself was stealing here and is now giving orders. At the same second, an older student named Sasha Finke bursts into the room. She is here to raise all the first-handers. But she comes across a picture where a freshman is pulling on his pants, and a rather beautiful girl is standing next to him. This makes the whole situation quite awkward, and Sasha hurries to leave as quickly as possible. Sam is shocked by everything that is happening, but the professor doesn't care about all these teenage habits. She wants to know how many base points he has already awakened. He admits that he has opened 20 points so far and wants to find out if he has a chance of getting a C rank. The teacher assures him that if he tries hard, he can reach C rank, but she is here to tell him something important. The professor advises him that when the time comes to undergo testing, she advises him not to show his full strength. Seeing the silent question in his eyes, the teacher invites him to guess where his telepathy can be used. Sam has an idea that his skill could be useful in surveillance. Annabelle is sure that this is the ideal option, and she is also convinced that if everyone finds out about this, he will be drawn into all the internal wars and intrigues of their universities. Of course, he can ignore her instructions and show strength left and right, but Sam says that he understands everything and wants to find out whether he should hide all his strength. She recommends not showing at least half of it. Besides, he studies at the Faculty of the Hidden type, and therefore completely switched under her name. Annabelle wants to know if this state of affairs suits him, to which she receives a positive answer. Since he is satisfied with everything, the professor allows him to sign the report. He sees that he needs to sign a paper stating that he neutralized the enemy during an enemy attack. Sam turns to Annabelle because he has nothing to do with it. It was she who killed the tiger, but the teacher tells him that without him, nothing would have worked out for her, so this is his merit. In addition, the association will give him a good monetary reward. The young man decides to sign the report because the extra money won't hurt him now. They finish here, and Annabelle says that she and Chuck should go take the test, but the main character is a little perplexed because his friend is now undergoing treatment. At the same time, leaning his ear to the door, Sasha tries to hear what they are talking about. Hearing footsteps approaching the door, he quietly jumps to the side and pretends that he is just wandering along the corridor. Sam follows Annabelle out of the room and, seeing Sasha, says that he is ready to go. Sasha grabs him by the shoulders and calls the young man cool because he spent the night with the Ice Queen goddess of the faculty. He wants to know how he managed it. Sam tries to explain to him that he understood everything wrong. She only came to him so that he would sign the documents. He continues to not believe the freshman because he and she were the only two here. The main character says that now, unfortunately, his neighbor is in the hospital. This news puts Sasha into even greater shock. He thinks that Sam specifically sent his friend to the hospital to stay with the beauty and already considers him a real alpha male. The young man understands that he cannot allow this crazy talker to say such things. Otherwise, rumors will quickly spread about him. He must somehow be forced to remain silent. Sam invites Sasha to reveal his secret of seduction and make a bet, to which the guy immediately agrees. The bet is that with his right hand he will throw a metal ball at Sasha. If he dodges, then so be it, he will reveal the truth. But if not, then he will never tell anyone about what he saw. Sasha agrees, and they take positions. The senior student has speed beyond his reaction, and he is confident of his victory. But Sam doesn't give him too much time to think and throws the first ball at him. Sasha barely managed to jump away from the first one, but the second ball landed right on his cheek. The senior student immediately begins to accuse Sam of being a swindler. After all, they only agreed on one ball, and how could they throw with their left hand? The main character reminds that no one said that it was impossible, and if you look closely, it's all one ball. Looking at the floor, Sasha notices that one half of a metal ball lies nearby. Sam divided it into two parts, and therefore technically he did not violate anything, so he won. Well, a dispute is a dispute, and Sasha promises that this topic will not be mentioned again. And the main character was once again convinced that yesterday's training was not in vain, and now the left hand is in no way inferior to the right. She and Sasha come to the test center, and then they each go about their own business. Sam easily goes to the office he needs. Since the erudition class does not receive special attention, there was no queue here. The employee says that the results of his blood sampling showed that in total, he has already awakened 20 gene base points. According to the rules, he can now pass to a low C rank. She also adds that since he has a telepathic skill, he should be tested on a special device, and if his abilities show up well, he will be given an average C rank. Leaving his office, his only concern was how to get a high score when testing the power of telepathy without attracting a lot of attention. Entering the testing room, he sees how one of the students is very tense and tries to find out what is in the dark box opposite him. Seeing how another student is being graded, Sam realizes that if he can move up 2 grades like the previous student, then that will be enough. Applying his skill, he understands what is the optimal distance and clarity he needs to measure. The hero will control his distance to get a good score and make sure that he is given an average C rank. The score is not particularly high and will not attract attention. Sam notices one of the inspectors looking at him, and a shiver runs down his spine. Has he really already been figured out? He pretends that his eyes suddenly began to itch in order to divert suspicion from himself. He is called for testing and asked to describe the object that he feels inside the box. In the cube, he senses several objects at once. His maximum distance was 3 meters and 24 hundredths of a meter. Previously, he could only see up to 3/12 hundredths of a meter. His limit increased by 12 centimeters. It turns out that in a few days, his ability increased. If he shows them all his strength, he will definitely get the best score, but he doesn't want to attract attention because he still wants to live. As a result, for the judges, he was able to see bread, raw meat, coffee beans in a cup, and a half-eaten hamburger. The distance was about 1/63 hundredths of a meter. As a result, he is given a low C rank, and his telepathy ability is assessed as normal. Unexpectedly for the hero, the teacher takes him out of the office, introduces himself as an assistant professor at the Faculty of Mental Telepathy named Jean-Paul, and invites Sam to transfer to him, since his telepathy is impressive. This whole situation is straining the young man because he made it clear that his abilities are ordinary. He politely refuses Jean, citing the fact that he has already chosen the Faculty of Erudition. The teacher keeps up with him and begins to say how much he can get if he chooses his department. Sasha, passing by, having heard about special quotas for recruiting and increasing ranks, begins to get angry that everything is going to Sam again. This makes the main character think, this is too tempting an offer. If his rank rises, it will not only reduce the burden on his family, but will even help him in the future. But he has a hidden type, just like Professor Annabelle, so his strength is clearly more in that direction. The right direction is most important, so he refuses the offer, surprising Sasha. In addition, Professor Jean, having learned that Annabelle was Sam's teacher, immediately began to behave strangely, began to shake a little, and drops of cold sweat appeared on his forehead. But after a while, he regained his normal appearance and continued to insist that Sam definitely needed to think more, and the faculty would be waiting for him. Seeing these strange mood swings, he thanks the professor and they say goodbye. Walking along the corridor with Sasha, the hero wants to find out from him whether his miracle's power of throwing beans is pushing him to increase his rank. After all, his ability can be attributed to the transcendental type. The assessment of the transcendental is, after all, slightly higher than the secretive. Sasha is confused by his questions about whether the first Vash really decided to compete with him. He advises Sam to just forget about his crazy ideas. The main character heads further to test the strength of his palm, and it's his turn. He approaches the entrance and the system begins to scan him to make sure that it is Sam Levins. Suddenly, a bunch of notifications about unread messages start to arrive on his watch. He decides to look at them after he passes the test, because he has been waiting in line for an hour. At this moment, unexpectedly for everyone in the queue, they begin to push people aside. Some big guy orders everyone to make way for him because he has powers of middle E rank. A skirmish begins between those who agree to skip it and those who consider it impermissible. In general, public facilities and services are given priority to those with high authority. If a person with low authority prevents a person with high authority from doing something, he will be arrested and convicted. Regular civilians typically have F-rank credentials, and if they want to advance to the highest, which is E rank, they need to upgrade their skills, which takes a very long time. In a university where all students have F-rank credentials, a person with E-rank credentials is demolished by God, not to mention the average E rank. Sam reasons that either this guy is very strong and received 50 merit points with his abilities, or he inherited his family's privileges. Having dispersed the entire line, the brute gets to him and tells him to move, again mentioning his E rank. Hearing that Sam has already confirmed his turn and will not give in to him, the big man's tower is torn off, and he begins to scream and orders the hero to get out of here immediately. The main character asks the teacher how many minutes he has left before his turn. He is told that he is next in order, and the wait will be approximately 3 to 5 minutes. The bully is not going to tolerate this, and having lifted Sam off the ground, he already wants to smack him in the face. But the young man stops his fist. Apparently, the bully decided that he was so easy to intimidate. He bends his fist forcefully in the opposite direction, so that a loud crunch of bones can be heard. The bully immediately lets him go and tries to feel his sore arm. He cannot stand such public humiliation, and standing up swings his good arm at Sam. The reaction does not fail the main character, and he notices the opponent's unprotected groin and shoots him a free kick. Everyone who saw this also felt pain in the groin area, and the bully fell to his knees in pain in front of Sam. His henchmen decide to answer for their leader and decide to attack the young man. Before the guys had time to show all their hidden techniques, the main character had already taken out his famous metal balls and launched them into the necks of his opponents. So all 4 hooligans were defeated by the main character and were now lying on the floor, groaning in pain. Sasha, watching from the queue, begins to have another attack of envy, because how the first one managed to defeat the 4 of them who also had a high rank. Sam asks the bullies if they're still going to fight, because next time he will throw metal balls in the direction of their eyes and then their heads. The students have already filmed this entire scene on their phones, and now this video is gaining popularity on the internet. Sam already suspects that he is finished. He hasn't been very successful at becoming invisible. Holding on to his belongings, the bully gets up and tries to threaten everyone who is filming this, that they will be in trouble, and he will settle personal scores with Sam. Sasha decides to come up and hold his comrade, saying that people from the discipline department will soon arrive here. Sam is not afraid of accusations against him, since there is evidence on video surveillance cameras that he was attacked first, and he was only defending himself. The comrade is worried that from the point of view of the department, all 4 were knocked down, and Sam was left without a single scratch. Even if he is telling the truth, he will also receive punishment, although not serious. The hero still doesn't understand what he did, to which Sasha explodes and says that this bully Gilbert Mulligan has considerable powers, and the fact that he did not let a person of a rank above him pass is punishable by law. The most severe punishment that can be imposed on him is expulsion and compensation for medical expenses. Sam thanks him for the information and decides to look at the unread messages. But since such a case occurs, he decides not to read them further, but simply confirm all the acts sent to him at once. From the messages, it is clear that he is being promoted to a low-ranking position and that money transfers are pouring in from various foundations. Sasha watches as a creepy smile appears on his friend's face. The senior student also decides to ease Sam's situation a little and offers to help Gilbert escort him to the first aid station and dissuade him from making a mountain out of a molehill in this situation. He says that he will forget about this if Sasha apologizes to them all on her knees and pays everyone moral damages. Sam approaches them and thanks the young man for his help, but he assures that he is able to solve his problems himself. He suggests that Gilbert tell the department everything, but not blame him for not giving him a chance. Mr. Mulligan looks down on his rival and says that Sam will regret his words. A representative of the department scolds the guys because they have not yet passed all the entrance tests, but have already violated the rules, and now they will be punished. He orders to send everyone to the department and interrogate everyone, to also take video from surveillance cameras and restore the event, to interview witnesses, students, and teachers. Gilbert does not miss the opportunity to show off his E rank here either. He tells how he simply asked to give way to him, but they refused him, and in addition, they attacked him. The inspector makes sure that his rank is genuine, and in this case, he really has the authority. He can tell everything in his own words, and he will not be interrogated. Gilbert is jubilant and asks Sam if he has any courage left. But the young man puts on a calm face, turns to the representative, and mentions that he has the authority of a low D rank, who also takes advantage. Gilbert begins to laugh hysterically, trying to catch his rival in a lie. The representative himself doubts that a freshman can have a low D rank. This is impossible. He himself worked for many years to get the credentials to a high E rank, and for a low D rank, hundreds of points are needed. After checking the data, the representative confirms that Sam Levins is not lying, but has a low D rank. He will now be asked to write a report and send it to the discipline department, and is also in contact if he has problems. Gilbert can't believe his ears that this all turned out to be true. The department representative introduces himself to students as Tim Schema and asks everyone to be mindful of following discipline rules. The hooligans leave along with representatives of the discipline department, having clearly lost this war. The teacher from the screen asks everyone to stop making noise and declares that they will start the assessment again. Sam is finally able to pass the test, and the observer even rewards him for the work he has done. In the next test, the teachers took care of the young man because they mistook him for a descendant of heroes. They even turned a blind eye to the fact that he was late for taking the test. After passing the test, Sam heads to the registration and payment office, where the employee says that his average grade is average C rank. His tuition is $16,000 a year, and the cost of training materials is $1,000. Also, since he has the authority of a low D rank according to regulations, Sam receives a 5% discount, and now his payment amount is $16,200. In the hall, behind the protagonist, they begin to whisper that perhaps this is the young man who fought back against Gilbert Mulligan. Sam hears these conversations and does not like that he is mistaken for a descendant, some kind of hero. The employee finishes and tells the main character that the reception procedure was successful. Having received the documents, he sees a message on his watch from teacher Annabelle. She invites him to come to her at the Genetics Research Institute. This was just right for the young man. He wanted to thank her for the special quota for recruiting students, which raised his rank. Entering the professor's office, Annabelle invites Sam to sit down. There are 3 reasons why she called him to her, but the young man ignores everything because he cannot take his eyes off the girl. Noticing his gaze on her, she threatens to transfer him to the insight class. Mr. Levins admits that she is so beautiful and temperamental that if he looks at her for a long time, he might lose consciousness. Hearing his words, she just sighs deeply because what can one take from a young guy? Annabelle repeats that there are 3 reasons, the first of which the mayor's defense command sent a letter of apology and asked to give it to him. Sam doesn't understand the point of sending him an apology. They should have apologized to the injured students and soldiers, not to him. The second news is that he is now an intern at Research Institute number 14 and will mainly be entrusted with some tasks. As a bonus, he will be given E-rank energy capsules every month. She wants to know if Sam has any objections. The main character has no objections to this. With or without bonuses, the main thing is that he learns to use his powers. The third news concerns his training and choice, whether he knows what is most important for entering the Hidden Institute. To be precise, for this there must be mental strength, and the use of any of their abilities is based on mental strength. Moreover, it itself is a genetic ability. Annabelle takes out metal balls and, throwing them, makes them fly throughout the office. But there is a small peculiarity: when flying, they do not touch anything. The teacher says that enough development of mental strength is not inferior to the unique abilities of an exceptional type. Human research has discovered countless secret cultivation methods, and their type's genetic base also has a secret method called inner vision. Going outside, he suspects that his teacher knew that he himself has inner vision. She also mentioned that anyone who is able to sense the smallest things has inner vision, however. Only a small number of genetically modified people and gradually named mutants are able to possess it. Students using this unique method discover an average of 15 gene base points, but they can be either useful or useless, plus there are various side effects. This news makes Sam a little happy because in fact everything depends on luck. Annabelle corrects him, saying that this is not entirely true. Before it could be compared to playing roulette, but after 100 years, humanity has developed safer methods of awakening genes. The main character also wants to find out if their type has something else besides internal vision. The professor claims that, unlike others, they have a greater chance of discovering new genes. The girl also reminds that full development requires the formation of a series of chains of genetic abilities. Sam also wonders what else inner vision is capable of besides the new genes they awaken. Annabelle says inner vision has several functions, but other than activating new genes, there isn't much to it. The main character thinks that his inner vision is different from others. The teacher gave him these training methods to practice. Walking towards his room in the corridor, he again bumps into his now comrade Sasha. He comes into the room with him to talk about something. While the young man is unpacking his purchases, he notes that their rooms are much better than their old ones. Sam hands him a can of cola and says that Sasha can speak directly to him. As it turns out, they contacted Sasha, introduced the Mulligan family, and they ask for all the problems to go away. They also talk to Sasha's father, and now he has no opportunity to refuse them. The Mulligan family enjoys authority in government circles in Kyoto. The young man asks Sam not to worry, because they will not get to their university. He is only infuriated by the fact that they had the impudence to say something to his father. Also, there is not exactly enmity between their family because no matter how you look at it, the Mulligan family has enemies all over the world. Sasha just wants his comrade to be as careful as possible with them. Bad thoughts immediately enter the main character's head about what will happen if he tries to chew this family apart. Sasha thinks that if he puts pressure on them, they could be expelled. There is a high probability that the discipline department will simply take them under supervision. Sam suspects that it was they who sent his comrade to this conversation so that he would soften up and they would not be expelled at his request. This turns out to be true, but Sasha swears that he just wants no one to get into trouble, and on top of all this, he gives Sam a card with a lot of money, which the Mulligan family presented as an apology. For such a huge sum, all he needs to do is write that there was a small fight among students, and not a violation of his authority. With that, they decided he escorts Sasha to the door and he thanks him and apologizes for the trouble. Having slammed the door, he is left alone with his huge capital. With 8 or 10 of his classmates, he would instantly become rich. He decides now is the time to try the workouts Annabelle recommended to him. Having found a meditation that suits him, he makes himself comfortable on the couch and begins it. Only his concentration is disrupted by thoughts of a beautiful goddess named Annabelle. He remembers how majestic she looked on the battlefield. Just as he wanted to concentrate again, a new message arrived on his watch from Marie Sank. She said that she had already checked into the hostel and invited him to her place, mentioning that she lived with a very beautiful neighbor. And now again, youthful impulses excite Sam's heart. How strong neighbor Marie must be. These thoughts do not leave his head. No matter how much he wants, he is no longer able to return to training today. Gilbert, having finished talking on the phone, reports to his colleague that all issues have been resolved and they will not leave. One of the bullies wants to know if they will just forget about this incident, but Gilbert's father made it clear that they should call it a day. Another of his comrades says that Sam is studying at the Faculty of Erudition and they are at the Beyond. They have a fairly small chance of meeting him and taking revenge. But one of the hooligans does not calm down, and he has a plan brewing to take revenge on him without doing anything to Sam. All they need to do is lift their fingers. He proposes to use the internet and make all the kids from the exorbitant university hate Sam Levins, so much so that he walks without raising his head. The second day at the university began. Walking down the street with full bags of food, the main character thinks that maybe Gilbert is not so bad. Without his generosity, he would hardly have been able to buy so much. On the way, he decides to check the news and, to his surprise, stumbles upon angry posts about himself. Sam realizes that someone definitely built this. It seems that they are trying to provoke him into a conflict between him and the Transcendental University. But the young man decides not to care about all this because he has an opening ceremony ahead. Crowds of students have already gathered in the square, and the solemn speech begins, in which every student admitted to this university is called Heaven's Chosen Ones, saying that they have the ability to think independently. This speech was given by the rector of the university named Adore Wold. He wants to end his speech colorfully, so he releases purple lightning into the sky. With one snap of his finger, Mr. Wood makes lightning thunder and clouds thicken. From such impending bad weather, all students' ears begin to block. Then the lightning abruptly disappears somewhere, and the students see again a clear sky with no signs of an approaching hurricane. One of the students notices that there is still something in the sky and shouts for everyone to pay attention to it. At that moment, a man descends from the sky like lightning, and everyone, for some reason, immediately takes him for Superman and begins to chant it. But it just turns out to be their rector named Tom, even if he is outrageous, but today he agrees to be a Superman for the students. As the crowd cheers, Rector Ador declares the ceremony over. Here comes the time of long school days and the first couple of this year. A teacher named Severus North introduces himself to his new students. For the next couple of years, he will teach them spiritual power training, the basics of the hidden type theory, and the basic practices of the hidden type. He also notes the horn on his head, which has already attracted the attention of the students. Severus says that this is a consequence of an error during training, and if among the students there are those who want to get a pair of horns, then he allows them to sleep on the pairs. From his speech, Sam understands what Annabelle's teacher was saying about useless genes at the base point. Having said the preface, the teacher suggests starting today's lesson and orders the assistants to distribute the teaching materials. Severus reminds them that they should all know that spiritual power is core to the hidden type. Now they will begin the first lesson on her training, pointing to the flask. He tells that this technology is needed to accumulate and test this power in the initial and middle stages. The material in the bottle is extremely rare. He orders everyone to pick up the instrument and focus on it, saying that they must give it their all, because this is the only way they can improve their spiritual power. First of all, you should focus your gaze inside the bottle, and then feel with all your might what is inside it. Severus reminds that the first time will be a little difficult. The main thing is not to worry, but to slowly pour in your spiritual strength. He just wanted to tell what would happen if he rushed in this matter, when a loud explosion rang out across the entire audience. The bottle exploded right in the hands of Sam, who clearly did not imagine his first day of school this way. Severus takes the student to his office, treats his wounds, and asks how the man is feeling. Sam replies that everything is fine, and the teacher notes that he saw his name in the erudition class magazine. Surprisingly, the professor is pleased with his result, the first pair, and he has already blown up the flask, which is already quite talented. He also says that Sam would be better off with 20-gram stones instead of 1 or 5-gram stones. The same story repeats with Severus as with the other teacher. He again offers a special quota so that Sam goes to him. But as before, the young man remains faithful to Professor Annabelle and refuses the teacher's offer, which clearly does not please Severus. Although this does not stop him, and he selflessly gives Sam information about unique methods of an exceptional type. Discuss all the issues and making sure that everything is in order, they decide to return to the classroom. Meanwhile, heated discussions are taking place in the class about what caused the explosion and what the teacher is now doing with the careless student. Sam enters the classroom and, returning to his seat, sighs sadly, because initially he wanted to live an inconspicuous life, and now he has gotten himself into something again. Severus also returns to his place and says that the practical part of the lesson will now begin. For this, he calls his assistant. In a fashionable manner, the man greets everyone and says that his name is Dan Schneid. He is a first year of the Transcendental Type Speed class. Currently, he has already opened 3 chains of genetic abilities and has an E rank. The group immediately begins to whisper and say that at such an early age, this is already incredible. Severus wants to use an example to explain to students the main disadvantage of the hidden type, and asks if anyone wants to become Dan's opponent. He warns that it will just be a little sparring, and he might as well wear protective equipment. But to everyone's surprise, Dan says that he has only one condition: Sam Levin's spar with him. The teacher is interested in why the choice fell on this particular student, and besides, combat practice is carried out voluntarily. Dan admits that since such a strong student appeared in the Faculty of Erudition this year, he really wants to conduct a practical lesson with him. Sam is under pressure from all sides, because if he doesn't come out to spar, then everyone will consider him just a coward. But to everyone's surprise, one of the students also volunteers to try to practice. The young man introduces himself as Frank Galm, and he is the owner of 2 chains of genetic abilities of an exceptional type. Dan agrees to feed this guy first. He asks if the teacher agrees to their sparring. Severus agrees, and pressing a button on the remote control, they find themselves in an impromptu ring. He warns competitors not to overdo it. Even in exhibition sparring, you can get injured, so he wants them to be careful. The report is in, and the fight is declared open. Frank warns that he has quite powerful fire, and his opponent needs to be careful. But it looks like he should have been more careful, because Dan very quickly knocks his opponent down. To the surprise of the students, the fireball that Frank had been holding at the ready flew out of the ring. But Professor Severus orders not to panic and puts out the fire. Dan, sitting astride his opponent, says that in a real fight he would already be dead. Frank wants to try again. They go to the corners again, and Dan says that this time he will give him 1 second to attack, because the exceptional type is very troublesome in the attack. Having learned from his past mistakes, Frank realizes that he first needs to step back. The second round has begun. Mr. Galm keeps his distance and waits for his opponent to decide to attack, because then he will face a retaliatory blow. This time the young man manages to dodge the enemy attack for a short time. But unfortunately everything ends. Just like in the first round, Dan turns out to be faster and wins again. Severus thanks Frank for his participation and notes that, using the example of this battle, they could observe what the main weakness of the hidden type is. The teacher invites others to try themselves in a duel, but Dan remembers that he never sparred with Sam Levinson. Sam decides that since his classmate says wish like that, he wouldn't mind practicing with him too. Going down the steps, the hero thinks that this fight would have happened anyway. There is no point in hiding. Now he will teach this Dan a lesson in front of everyone. Let them know that it is better not to mess with him. While walking upstairs, Frank decides to warn Sam to keep his distance and mentions that his left leg is weaker than his right. While his opponent is warming up in the ring, Dan decides to record their fight on camera. Sam, noticing this, was only happy so he could see the ins and outs of their battle. The fighters take their positions and the next round is declared open. Dan attacks first. Sam realizes that Frank was not lying about the enemy's speed. He is moving very quickly. But suddenly, before the enemy wanted to hit Sam, he seemed to disappear into thin air. An object resembling a pyramid hovered in the air for a second, and while Dan hesitated, it crashed right on his head. Having risen, the enemy cannot understand what it was, perhaps a spiritual incarnation, but do first-year students really study this? Watching the fight, Severus realizes that, even though the technique was done roughly, Sam Levin's in his eyes is becoming a real genius. But Dan does not sleep, and flying towards the enemy grabs his hand and kicks him in the face. Mr. Schneid does not hesitate and returns to his starting position in one jump. This is done to gain momentum again and deliver the finishing blow. Despite the fact that Sam, using telepathy, clearly sees all of Dan's attacks, his body is not able to keep up with his reaction. The hero already understands that he will have to spend all his free time on training. Despite Dan's variety of techniques, his telepathy can still pick up the trajectory of his movements. Sam launches a spiritual embodiment at him again. The enemy mocks, because he is sure that now he will not fall for this trick. But having dodged once, he did not expect that the blow would come from behind, and again his face would be crumpled. Jumping high into the air, Dan wants to throw a powerful punch, but Sam blocks it. With hatred boiling in him, he continues to kick with all his might and finally breaks through the enemy's defense. Sam flies to the side and hits his head on the arena dome. But even this is not enough for his opponent, and he again hovers over him and delivers the decisive blow. Sam turns out to be the loser, and Severus hurries to stop the fight as soon as possible, saying that Dan has gone too far. Dissatisfied exclamations are heard in the audience. They do not like the cruelty shown by Mr. Schneid. Dan notes that the fight comes first, and then the training, Because they are genetically modified people, they will face a lot of dangers, so you always need to give your best. Sam, who woke up, also thinks so, but is his opponent strong enough? The young man says that if he has enough courage, he can see his opponent to the end. Only this time he would actually try his best to knock him down. Sam agrees to a rematch, but decides to check with the teacher if this is combat training, then he can use all his abilities. Teacher Severus turns out to be not against the fight, and gives the go-ahead, and Sam wants to know if in this case he can use his special ability. Dan just grins in response and says that there is no problem. The main character already feels that superiority is on his side and asks the audience for a couple of metal balls, since he forgot his own at home. This comes as a surprise to classmates. Some think that the tone will use a bomb launcher. Marie, sitting with one of her classmates named Lily, asks to lend her necklace, to which she unconditionally takes off and gives away the jewelry. The girl is very grateful to her for this. Miss Sank runs up to the arena and hands Sam 3 pearls. The young man says that this should be enough for him. He warns his opponent that he has already spared him twice, but if this time they really fight to the fullest, then he should be more careful. But behind this mask of confidence, Sam actually fears that Dan's speed is too fast, and there is a good chance that the enemy will dodge his balls, so he must find a way to increase his throwing speed. Dan is already in position and also wishes his opponent to be more attentive. He takes off and rushes at Sam, shouting that he will beat him until his opponent gets up. At this moment, a spiritual embodiment is already flying towards him, aiming to cause damage to the enemy. But Dan manages to get his bearings and breaks his spiritual cone with a powerful blow, saying that now it won't work. Sam doesn't give up. This time he doesn't waste time on trifles. He's already creating a lot of cones. But even this is not a hindrance to the opponent. He again destroys each of the projectiles launched at him. In response to Dan's exclamations that he wonders how much longer his enemy will last, Sam releases another batch of charges. Mr. Schneid dodges the blows again, but he understands that sooner or later these cones will hit him, so he needs to somehow get out of this circle. He wants to win some space for himself and therefore, pushing off from the ground, soars into the air. Now being, as he thinks, in a more advantageous position, he shouts that Sam will not fool him. The young man grins and takes out his 3 treasured balls and is already preparing to load them. Undoubtedly, Dan is very fast for a prohibitive type, but without support he cannot be so nimble. The enemy realizes with horror that his enemy deliberately directed the cones along such a trajectory. Sam has already collected enough energy, and concentrating the power of his hand, he releases all 3 balls into flight. Dan is so unlucky that one of the balls flies directly into his groin with ultrasonic force. The enemy turns out to be knocked out and now, languishing in pain, holds onto his bells. The classmates begin to applaud and shout about how beautiful Sam made the teaching assistant. Severus is not amused at this time. He conveys a message to the ambulance so that they urgently come in, since there is a student with a serious injury who may need surgery. The doctors quickly arrived and placed the victim on a gurney, making a preliminary diagnosis. A sprained ligament, the meniscus and the synovial membrane were seriously damaged. The rest will be known after the operation, but it is believed that even the operation can leave consequences. The medical worker asks Severus how it all happened. The teacher covers his face with his hand and replies that first of all, everything possible must be done to cure the student, and he will write a report on the incident later. The doctors agree and take the victim away. Frank decides to approach Sam, who is sitting at his desk, and find out if he regrets that he beat Dan up, but the young man doesn't regret it at all. If he had given in, he would now have ended up on a stretcher. Severus informs the audience that there were some unexpected incidents in today's lesson, but it was quite educational. He believes that this should not be given much importance, since they are freshmen, and after the next 3 months, any serious injuries will become a daily routine for them. And of course, their university provides professional medical care, so students don't have to worry. The teacher announces that the class is over and now he will send them homework. At the same time, students were glued to the screens of their tablets, where videos had already appeared of how an upstart from an out-of-this-world institute was beaten during a combat exercise. Sam is finally back in his room and can take a breather. During this day, people had already started making fun of him on the internet because of Gilbert's handout. The young man blew up the flask in a steam match, and the end was a duel with Dan Schneid. Suddenly, a notification from his roommate arrived on his watch. It turned out to be a list of house rules, which regulated how much and when to clean, what is forbidden to wash in a machine, when you can bring guests and who is not allowed under any circumstances. At the moment of reading this boring list, an unfamiliar young man entered the room, asking the hero from the threshold if he was Sam Levins. This young man turned out to be his roommate, a third-year student named Liam Asker. Sam says hello and thinks to himself how handsome his neighbor is, who is also a university idol. Liam immediately says that if his neighbor does not agree with the rules, then they will need to go to the manager and change his room, but the main character turns out to agree to the conditions prescribed to him. Looking at his new neighbor, Liam notices that the young man looks rather shabby and wants to know if he is injured. Sam reluctantly reveals that he got hurt during combat practice today. The elder immediately interrupts him and points out to the hero that he looks like a squeezed lemon, and he is afraid that he will not survive even a 3-month period of protection. The main character remembers that teacher Severus mentioned something about a 3-month period. Liam decides to give his new neighbor some healing ointment and recommends using it when changing the bandage. The young man thanks him and asks him to tell him more about the 3-month period that he himself mentioned. Mr. Asker grins, folds his arms over his chest, and says that Sam really doesn't know anything. Every genetic evolution university encourages students to improve with each other. Keir University is no exception. Those who come out on top in the competition will receive more training resources. Every year, a list of the 100 best students comes out. First place is the Dragon, the top 10 are the Tigers. For each place, a separate reward is given. Sam is surprised to see a D-rank energy capsule because it's $100,000 out of the blue. Liam says that the so-called 3-month protection period means that the freshman will not be bothered by competition for 3 months, but after 3 months, the competition will be completely open. But there are especially gifted guys like Sam who strive to break the rules of the university. The main character does not quite understand what they are talking about. The older neighbor says that every year, because of the competition, students get seriously injured, become disabled and expelled, and sometimes die. This is not uncommon. Heading towards the exit, Liam says goodbye that Sam has already become a target, so now no one is interested in his problems, and if he wants to survive, he must train properly. Left alone, the hero thinks about everything he heard. He assumed that it would be difficult to get along with the elder, but he never expected that Liam would be a man with a sharp tongue and a soft heart. But his words about the target worry Sam about how things could have turned out this way. At the very least, Gilbert and Dan have a grudge against him, but one way or another, these show-offs have already been filmed, and he was at least able to learn about their strength. All these thoughts give him the idea to look at the training methods that Master Severus gave him. Sam hopes that the methods will include skills such as affinity with metal. Finally, evening came, and the young man took a shower after such a busy day. Leaving the bathroom, he felt as if he had been reborn again. And he hears that the clock on his bed is starting to ring. Sasha is trying with him. Having answered the call, a comrade's angry speeches came from the receiver, saying that he had seen posts on the internet with the crippled Dan and wanted to know what Sam had managed to do again, while Sasha stated that the hero should contact the one who posted these videos on network and gives his number. The main character decides to go online and see what they write about him, and seeing how the whole story has been distorted to the point that he is threatening all the students of the prohibitive type and maiming people, Mr. Levins is shocked. With all the details simply left out to make him look bad, Sam decides to tell this senior that his posts are incomplete and that it is wrong. He contacts a student named Romeo Fritz, introduces himself to him, and informs him of his dissatisfaction. He wants the students to see the whole truth as it really was, to which the senior student asks if Sam wants to settle everything. And he announces a price of $500,000. If he gives him that amount, then Romeo will agree to change everything in the posts. After waiting a minute, the extortionist bursts into loud laughter and says that he is just joking. He would not dare to rob a poor student, and in general there is nothing wrong with his posts. Romeo sees no reason to change them. Sam, hearing this, tries to shame the senior student because Mr. Fritz is a public figure, and how can he think that it is right to spread false rumors? Romeo points out that Dan Schneid really wasn't mutilated by Sam, asks him to point out where the author lied, and says that he's too busy and the call will end there. Having completed the call, Romeo leans back in his chair and laughs at how naive young people can be. Sam remains unhappy after such a tense conversation. His enemy turned out to be really cunning. His loopholes cannot be recorded. The hero comes up with the idea that he can try to complain about his work, but at the same time he understands that Romeo can continue to work on other conspiracies, and this way he will not get rid of the infection. But still, some measures need to be taken, and Sam begins to get ready, thinking that since his opponent did not want to be kind, then he should not blame him for his rudeness. At such a late hour, he decided to go to the discipline department, entering the foyer and being greeted by the secretary. Just as he wanted to communicate his desire to write a complaint, the head of the department, Tim Scam, who was already familiar to him, entered the foyer to find out what was happening here. Sam reports that someone was using the university's website for blackmail and extortion. Tim confirms that these are very serious violations. He already roughly knows what the matter is, but now he needs to go to a meeting, and the head promises